I'm not posting this for sympathy or karma. I'm posting it because I've been carrying this story around for years and it still wakes me up sometimes. Robbing an electronics store was a spontaneous decision that could have cost me my life. And honestly, that sentence alone should tell you how messed up my headspace was back then. For context, my name's William. This happened in my mid-20s during that stretch of life where everything felt temporary. Jobs, apartments, relationships, morals. I wasn't some criminal mastermind or hardened thief. I was broke, angry, and convinced the world owed me something it clearly didn't. I just lost a job I hated but depended on. My car was on its last breath, and I was drowning in that quiet panic that comes when bills don't care how unlucky you've been. The electronics store sat in a strip mall I passed almost every day. Bright lights, big glass windows, people casually browsing things worth more than what I had in my bank account. And I used to stand across the parking lot smoking, telling myself I was just killing time. Looking back, I think some part of me was already rehearsing a line I hadn't admitted I was going to cross. This wasn't about needing food or medicine. It was about pride, desperation, and a stupid belief that one reckless act could reset my life. I didn't wake up that morning planning to commit a crime, but by the time the sun went down, I was someone I didn't recognize. And that's where this story really starts. The thing about spontaneous decisions is they're rarely instant. They creep up on you while you're pretending not to notice. That afternoon, I walked past the store like I always did, but instead of looking away, I went in. Told myself I was just browsing. Killing time. Same lie, different setting. Inside, everything smelled like new plastic and recycled air. A teenager in a polo shirt asked if I needed help, and I almost laughed at how normal it all felt. Rows of laptops, phones tethered by cables, security cameras blinking quietly in the corners. I remember thinking how absurd it was that people trusted glass and minimum wage employees to guard thousands of dollars worth of stuff. What tipped me wasn't some big dramatic thought. I was noticing how understaffed the place was. 2 employees, 1 manager in the back office, no security guard. The exit was close. My heart started doing that annoying thing where it beats faster before your brain finishes a sentence. I left without buying anything and sat in my car for a long time. Radio off, windows cracked, hands on the steering wheel like I was deciding whether to drive home or somewhere else entirely. I kept telling myself, don't be stupid. But another voice, quieter, meaner, kept saying, you won't get another chance like this. That was the first moment I realized this wasn't just a thought experiment anymore. I wasn't asking if I could do it. I was asking how. I wish I could say I put together some clever, airtight plan. Truth is, what I had was closer to a rationalized impulse wrapped in a few comforting lies. I didn't draw maps or time security shifts. I just convinced myself that thinking about it for an hour counted as preparation. I drove around aimlessly, telling myself I was clearing my head. In reality, I was stalling, hoping the urge would pass or that something external would make the decision for me. It didn't. Every red light felt like another chance to turn around, and every green light felt like permission. I took inventory of what I had going for me, which wasn't much. I knew the store layout. I knew there were expensive portable items near the front. I knew I didn't look particularly threatening, just another forgettable guy in a hoodie and worn-out sneakers. That last part felt important at the time, like anonymity could double as protection. I remember checking my phone and seeing I had $23 in my account. That number lodged itself in my brain like proof that I was out of options. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone, that the store was insured, that corporations factor this stuff in. All those justifications came fast and easy, which should have been my first real warning sign. By the time I parked again across the street, the plan, if you can call it that, was simple. Go in, act normal, move fast, get out. No weapons, no threats, just speed and confidence. I sat there for a few seconds longer, hands shaking, realizing that once I opened the car door, There was no backing out without admitting something ugly about myself. I opened the door anyway. The automatic doors slid open like they always did, cheerful and indifferent, and that almost broke my nerve. There's something unsettling about how ordinary everything looks right before you do something irreversible. Same lights, same displays, same dumb pop song playing overhead. The world didn't care that I was about to screw my life up. I remember being hyper aware of my body, how my hands didn't know where to rest, how my mouth felt dry even though I kept swallowing. I forced myself to slow down because panic looked suspicious, or at least that's what I told myself. I nodded at one of the employees like I belonged there, like I was just another guy comparing specs he couldn't afford. My brain was screaming at me to abort. You can still leave. No one knows what you're thinking. But my legs kept moving, carrying me toward the front displays where the smaller high-end items were kept. Everything felt louder than it should have been. The hum of electronics, the click of keyboards, the thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. I caught my reflection in one of the black TV screens and barely recognized myself. I looked pale, focused, like someone playing a role they hadn't rehearsed enough for. That scared me more than anything else, because it meant I was already halfway gone. Somewhere behind me, a customer laughed at something a clerk said. Normal life, continuing without hesitation. And standing there, pretending to browse, I realized I wasn't just about to steal from a store. I was about to cross a line I'd spent my whole life saying I never would. That's when it truly hit me. Whatever happened next was going to stick. There's a moment right before you act where time stretches in a weird, rubbery way. I stood there pretending to read a price tag, and in that stretched out second, I felt every possible future pressing in at once. Walking out empty-handed, getting caught, getting away, becoming someone worse. My hand moved before my brain finished arguing with itself. I reached out, unclipped one of the smaller boxes from the display. Something light, expensive, and stupidly easy to grab. The motion felt mechanical, like I was watching myself from a few feet away. I slid it under my hoodie, heart slamming so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Nothing happened at first. No alarms, no shouting. Just the same pop song and the same fluorescent lights. That almost made it worse. I took a step back, then another, trying to look bored instead of terrified. I kept my eyes forward, afraid that if I made eye contact with anyone, they'd see straight through me. As I drifted toward the exit, one of the employees glanced up. Our eyes met for half a second. He smiled, polite, automatic, and went back to what he was doing. That smile hit me like a punch to the chest. It wasn't suspicion, it was trust. Or maybe just indifference. Either way, I didn't deserve it. The doors were right there. I could feel the cool air from outside, sneaking in every time someone passed through. My legs felt numb, like they might give out or bolt on their own. I told myself, just keep walking, don't run, don't think. I stepped closer to the exit, convinced the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The doors didn't alarm. That was the first surprise. I crossed the threshold and felt this dizzy rush of relief, like I'd just escaped a bad dream. For half a step, I actually thought I was free. That's how stupid confidence can be. It blooms fastest right before it gets crushed. Hey, sir. The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was confused. That made me stop cold. I turned around and saw the manager standing a few feet behind me, one hand raised like he wasn't sure whether to wave or grab my sleeve. Middle-aged guy, tired eyes, tie loosened like he'd already worked too many hours that day. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't threatening. He just looked disappointed, like I'd made his shift harder for no good reason. My brain went blank. Every lie I'd rehearsed evaporated. I mumbled something, don't even remember what, and instinctively adjusted my hoodie. That tiny movement was all it took. His eyes flicked down. His expression changed. Sir, he said again, firmer this time, I need you to come back inside. Time snapped back to full speed. Adrenaline hit so hard my hands started shaking. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the part where everything falls apart. People nearby slowed, sensing tension. A woman with a shopping bag stared. A kid tugged on his dad's sleeve. I had a choice, and I knew it. Go back inside and deal with whatever came next, or run. I ran. Not fast at first, just enough to break the moment, then faster. I heard someone shout behind me, shoes slapping against pavement, the world narrowing into breath and motion and fear. I wasn't thinking about jail or charges or consequences anymore. I was thinking about not getting caught. Not right then, not in front of everyone. That's when I realized how badly I'd underestimated what I'd done, and how little control I actually had. Running felt unreal, like my legs were borrowed from someone else. The parking lot stretched out longer than it ever had, asphalt shimmering under the lights. I cut between parked cars, breath ripping in and out of my chest, the box under my hoodie bouncing like it wanted to betray me. Someone was yelling. Maybe the manager, maybe another employee. I didn't look back. Looking back makes things real, and I couldn't afford real. All I could think was, get to the car, like it was a finish line that could magically erase what I'd just done. My keys slipped out of my hand the first time. I almost screamed, dropped to a knee, scooped them up, fingers numb and clumsy. In that second, I was sure someone would grab me from behind, pin me down, make a scene. Nothing happened. The night stayed cruelly quiet except for my own wheezing. I yanked the door open, threw myself inside, and locked it without thinking. The engine coughed before it turned over, and I swear my heart stopped with it. Then it roared to life, louder than it had any right to be. I peeled out of the spot, tires squealing, headlights swinging wildly as I tore toward the exit. As I pulled onto the road, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. No one followed, no flashing lights, just the strip mall shrinking into the dark like it was swallowing my mistake whole. That's when the shaking really started. Not fear anymore. Shock. I laughed once, sharp and ugly, and then immediately felt sick. I kept driving, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, realizing I'd crossed from almost caught into on the run, even if it was just in my own head. And the worst part? I still had the stolen item on me, like proof I couldn't pretend this never happened. I drove for way too long. Past my exit, past neighborhoods I recognized, like distance could dilute what I'd just done. The box felt heavier by the minute, pressing against my ribs. A solid reminder that this wasn't just adrenaline anymore. It was evidence. I pulled into a dimly lit grocery store parking lot and just sat there with the engine running. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept replaying the manager's face, that split second where disappointment turned into certainty. I imagined him calling the cops, describing me in vague, useless terms. Hoodie, average build, white guy, late 20s. I imagined a patrol car cruising slowly past, spotlight sweeping over my windshield. I tucked the item under the seat like that would make it invisible. It didn't help. The guilt crawled up my throat anyway. I tried to justify it again. No one got hurt, it's just stuff. But the words sounded hollow now. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was a choice I'd made, and it was sitting in my car with me. Eventually I went home, parking crooked because I couldn't focus enough to straighten out. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, listening for sirens that never came. The silence was loud, too loud. I set the box on my kitchen table and stared at it like it might explode. That night I didn't sleep. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every passing car felt like it was slowing down for me. I kept thinking about how close I'd been, how easily it could have gone the other way. And somewhere between dawn and exhaustion, it dawned on me that getting away might be its own kind of punishment. The next morning felt wrong, like the world had updated without me. Sunlight through the blinds, birds making noise, neighbors heading to work, Everyone moving on as if I hadn't done something that split my life into a before and after. I called in sick to a job I barely cared about anymore and spent the morning pacing my apartment. I kept the stolen item hidden in a backpack in the closet, but I could still feel it there, like a presence. Every time I passed the closet door, my stomach tightened. I thought about throwing it away, donating it, taking it back anonymously like that would somehow reset the universe. None of those options felt clean or brave, just desperate. I Googled the store, checked their social media, half expected to see a grainy still frame of my face with a caption asking for tips. Nothing. No posts. No updates. That almost made it worse. The lack of consequences gave my brain room to spiral. I started building stories to protect myself. They probably deal with this all the time. They won't bother reviewing the footage. Even if they do, what are the chances? Each lie was a brick in a wall I was trying to hide behind, but the wall felt thin. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification, and my heart leapt into my throat. Just a spam text. I laughed again, the same sharp laugh from the car, and then sat down on the floor because my legs gave out. That's when I realized how badly this was messing with me. I wasn't proud. I wasn't relieved. I was unraveling. I'd wanted money, control, a quick fix. What I got instead was paranoia and a growing suspicion that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. For the next few days, I lived in a constant state of flinch. Every knock in the hallway, someone else's door, the elevator, felt like it was meant for me. I stopped answering my phone unless I recognized the number. I avoided windows. I even rehearsed what I'd say if the police showed up, which is a special kind of torture because no version of that conversation ends well. I kept expecting a knock that never came. That absence started to mess with me more than fear did. When you're scared, at least you know what you're reacting to. Waiting for consequences that don't arrive leaves too much room for your brain to invent them. I'd wake up in the middle of the night convinced I'd heard footsteps outside my door. I started dreaming about the store, about the manager's voice calling out to me, calm and disappointed, echoing down endless aisles. At some point, I convinced myself I had to do something. Just sitting there felt like admitting guilt without resolution. I took the backpack out of the closet and put it on the table again. I opened it, stared at what I'd taken, and felt a wave of shame so strong it surprised me. Not because of what it was worth, but because of how small it made everything else feel. I even drove back past the strip mall once, heart racing, telling myself I was just checking something. I didn't park. I didn't go in. I just slowed down enough to see the store lights still on, people still going in and out like nothing had happened. That was the moment I understood how invisible my crime really was, and how visible it had become inside my own head. The knock never came, but neither did relief. After about a week, the panic dulled into something heavier and harder to name. Not fear exactly, more like a low-grade sickness I carried everywhere. I went back to work. I laughed at the right times. I nodded through conversations. On the outside, I looked fine. On the inside, I felt like I was dragging a secret behind me on a chain. The stolen item stayed hidden. I couldn't bring myself to use it or sell it. Every option felt like admitting the crime again, just in a different way. Selling it would make it real. Using it would make it personal. Taking it back would mean walking into that store and risking everything. So instead, I did nothing, which turned out to be its own kind of punishment. I started noticing how casually people talk about stealing. Office jokes about borrowing supplies. Friends bragging about shoplifting in their teens like it was a rite of passage. I'd laugh along, but inside I felt exposed, like if I stayed too still, someone would see the truth written on me. The worst part was how normal it all became. Days passed. Nothing happened. No calls, no cops, no consequences. And that terrified me in a way I didn't expect. If you can do something that big and the world doesn't immediately slap you for it, what stops you from doing it again? That question followed me everywhere. I didn't like the answer my brain kept offering. About 2 weeks after the robbery, I almost unraveled everything by being stupid in a completely different way. I was at a coffee shop near my apartment, zoning out, trying to feel like a normal person again. I just started to believe maybe this would fade into an ugly memory I could outgrow. Then I saw him. Not the manager, thank God, but one of the store employees. Same polo shirt, same logo. He was in line ahead of me, scrolling on his phone, complaining to the barista about the price of oat milk. My vision tunneled. My mouth went dry. For a second, I was sure he'd recognize me instantly, that he'd turn around and say, "That's him." He didn't, but my body didn't know that yet. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out right there between the pastry case and the tip jar. I stepped out of line, muttered something about forgetting my wallet, and practically fled the place. Outside, I leaned against the brick wall and tried to breathe without looking like I was having a breakdown. That was the moment it really sank in. I wasn't being chased by the law. I was being chased by my own memory. Every random encounter, every uniform, every strip mall was now a potential trigger. I couldn't unknow faces. I couldn't rewind time. On the walk home, I finally admitted something I'd been avoiding. I hadn't gotten away clean. I just traded external consequences for internal ones, and I didn't know how long I could keep carrying that weight without it showing. After the coffee shop incident, something shifted. The fear wasn't sharp anymore. It was resolved. Like my body had decided this couldn't just sit unresolved forever. I didn't suddenly grow a conscience overnight, but I got tired of feeling hunted by my own thoughts. I started researching ways people made it right without making it worse. Anonymous returns, donations, confessions written and never sent. Every option felt either cowardly or catastrophic. Walking into the store with the item and an apology sounded noble in theory and completely unhinged in practice. I pictured myself stammering, the manager calling the cops, my life imploding in a very public, very permanent way. So I did the smallest, quietest thing I could live with. I sold the item, not for profit, but to erase it. I got far less than it was worth, and honestly, that felt appropriate. The money didn't feel like a win. It felt like a fee. I used it to pay down a bill that had been keeping me up at night, and even that brought no relief. I told myself this was me closing the loop. No stolen object, no evidence, just a memory and a lesson. But the truth was, I was still negotiating with myself, trying to find a version of the story where I wasn't the villain. I avoided that strip mall entirely after that. Took longer routes, changed routines, not because I thought I'd be recognized, but because I didn't trust myself to face it without cracking. I was learning something uncomfortable. You don't get to decide when you've paid enough for a mistake. Sometimes the payment plan is emotional and it has no end date. And deep down, I knew the story wasn't over yet. Months passed, then a year. The story shrank with time, but it never disappeared. It settled into me, like a scar you forget about until the weather changes. On the surface, my life improved. I got a steadier job, moved to a better place, started fixing things instead of running from them. If you looked at me then, you'd probably say I turned things around. But every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of the version of myself that could have gone the other way. It showed up in small moments, when money was tight again, when anger flared, when I felt wronged or invisible. My brain would offer the same ugly shortcut it had before. You could just take what you need. That thought scared me more than the memory of the robbery ever did, because it meant the line I crossed was still there, just faded. I realized something uncomfortable. The most dangerous part of that night wasn't the chase or the risk of getting caught. It was how easy it had been to justify, how quickly I'd turned myself into the kind of person who could do that and keep moving. If the manager hadn't stopped me, if I hadn't run, If I'd walked out clean without a word, I don't know how that would have shaped me. I think about that a lot, about how close I came to normalizing it, to telling this story differently, maybe with less guilt, more pride. That possibility sits heavier than the actual crime. By then, I understood this wasn't just a story about stealing something, it was about identity, about realizing how thin the line is between who you think you are and who you can become when you're desperate enough. And that's why I'm telling this now, even years later, because the last part of this story isn't about what I did. It's about what I decided never to do again. If you're looking for a clean, moral, or a dramatic ending, I don't really have one. I didn't get arrested. I didn't turn myself in. I didn't have some cinematic moment of redemption. I just lived with it and decided over and over again not to repeat it. What I learned is this: the danger isn't just getting caught, it's discovering how flexible your values become when you're tired, broke, and angry enough. I always thought crime was something other people did, people with worse upbringings or fewer options. That lie died in a strip mall parking lot. Turns out, the line between I'd never and I already did is thinner than anyone wants to admit. I still think about the manager sometimes, about how he spoke to me like a human instead of a criminal, even for a second. That moment probably did more to stop me from going further down that road than fear ever could. Shame sticks. Being seen sticks. So here's my advice, for whatever it's worth. If you feel yourself justifying something you know is wrong, slow down. Not tomorrow. Not after you've thought it through. Right then. Talk to someone, walk away, let the discomfort pass. No quick fix is worth turning yourself into someone you have to spend years apologizing to in your own head. I don't tell this story because I'm proud of it. I tell it because I survived it, and because I know how easy it is to talk yourself into one bad decision and call it an exception. It never is. That night didn't ruin my life, but it showed me exactly how I could, and that knowledge has kept me honest ever since.